Story 1. A conservative member of parliament once said that if families were struggling to feed their children, they could sell their pearls. Story 2. You should learn about finance so you can invest all the money you do not have. Story 3. A cereal company chief executive officer tells people to feed their children cereal for supper because it is cheaper. Story 4. A year of rent is a down payment on a house. Okay, so am I supposed to be homeless for that year while I save? Story 5. Please donate $5 to a hungry family in need this season. Large grocery chains and donut shops often discard edible food each night, contributing to overflowing landfills, and sometimes fire or discipline employees who try to recover it. Story 6. Not exactly the same, but one of the Kardashians uniting police officers and protesters with a Pepsi was quite effective. Story 7. Gary Pilnick, the chief executive officer of Kellogg's, who makes millions of dollars per year, recently advised cash-strapped people to eat cereal for dinner. Story 8. Let the market decide when complaining about a company that has a monopoly on a service. Story 9. We are going to look at cutting Medicare and Social Security. Story 10. Running a company that profits from denying people the healthcare benefits they paid for, causing preventable deaths, while not having a personal security detail. Story 11. J.D. Vance is telling people who struggle with the cost of daycare to ask grandparents or other family members to watch their children while they work. Story 12. You want to be your own boss? Get an education degree first. You want to start a family? Buy a house first. You want to start saving money? Pay off your debts first. People often dismiss investing in stocks and currencies as frivolous, telling you to just eat cake. Consider your options carefully. Story 13. Melania Trump is wearing her "I really don't care. Do you?" designer coat. Story 14. Vote with your dollar. I'd rather we stick with one person, one vote, please. Story 15. Why you should not invest money you do not have in cryptocurrency. Story 16. Pull themselves up by their bootstraps. People who use that phrase have no idea what it originally meant. Story 17. Martin Shkreli kind of fits the bill. According to Wikipedia, in September 2015, Shkreli was widely criticized when Turing obtained the manufacturing license for the antiparasitic drug Daraprim and raised its price to insurance companies from $13.50 to $750 United States dollars per pill. He did it purely to generate more profit. Story 18. From 2018 to 2019, Chile offered many examples of this. No surprise, half the country burned in riots soon after. The price of public transport went up, and a politician said it would motivate people to get up earlier. People on Santiago's outskirts were already rising at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. to reach their workplaces downtown or in the more affluent parts of the city. When grocery prices rose, another politician said it was not that bad because the price of flowers had gone down. When students protested against another public transport fare increase, the subway system chief executive officer confronted them and said something along the lines of, "Stop protesting. No one is taking this seriously." Thousands of people joined the protests soon after. The chief executive officer of a private healthcare provider stated in an interview that his business had no use for the sick. Story 19. Live beneath your means. In order to do that, you have to earn beyond your needs. Story 20. Trickle-down economics. Then again, that's really more. Let them eat our crumbs. Story 21. Why did you not ask for help? Is asked after someone chose to end their own life despite having openly asked for help to make their life worth living for years or decades. Story 22. Donald Trump is throwing rolls of toilet paper into a crowd after a weather event. Story 23. At one company where I worked, they hosted an event intended to inspire women on how to juggle a career and raise a family. All the female executives advised getting an au pair to help with the children. Story 24. Elon Musk said Americans must suffer financial hardship while he cuts $2 trillion from the budget, even as he continues to enjoy tax breaks, loopholes, and deductions. It was more of a let them eat cake moment than Marie Antoinette's original utterance. Story 25. The person who said millennials could not buy homes because they were spending too much on lattes and avocado toast. Story 26. A politician said it's bullshit that there are people going hungry in our country, because at McDonald's you can get a warm meal very cheaply. Story 27. Telling someone who is barely making rent to just get another job if you don't like it. Saying no one wants to work anymore while berating a 16-year-old fast food employee who is at work. Story 28. Telling poor women trapped in states with misogynistic policies or in abusive relationships that if they do not like it they are free to leave is misleading. Leaving is not free. Story 29. I do not know, but I can tell you what the modern equivalent of saying that someone should cut Lewis's head off and telling people to fuck him is. The New York Police Department is not happy about it. Story 30. Get off your butt and work. It seems like no one wants to anymore. Story 31. At that time, the United States was experiencing the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. Food bank waiting lines stretched for blocks, while Nancy Pelosi appeared on the news to give a tour of her giant freezers full of gourmet ice cream. Story 32. If you cannot afford gas for your car, get an electric car. I cannot remember who said that. It was likely an out-of-touch celebrity or politician. Story 33. When one of the world's richest people says average Americans will have to face financial hardships because he plans to cut systems he calls streamlining the government, we should instead eliminate tax loopholes, tax the ultra-wealthy at the same rate as everyone else, and pass laws to address the wealth gap in our country, where the top 1% owns 30% of the nation's wealth and the bottom 50% owns less than 3%. Story 34. Rich celebrities like Beyoncé are stumping for Harris but not actually doing anything. Story 35. My mother told me they made do with what they had when they built their house on an acre plot for $144,000, which is now worth $400,000 or more. Story 36. Separate those children from the mothers crossing the border. Story 37. Travel is a matter of courage, not money. Story 38. Let them repeatedly contract coronavirus disease 2019, even as scientific evidence increasingly shows that repeated infections are linked to gradual disability and death. Story 39. The Democratic National Committee robbed their constituents of a fair 2016 and 2024 primary, and, therefore, the election. Fucking L. The committee's assumption of an easy win and willingness to present voters with a lesser candidate is a let-them-eat-cake attitude to me. Story 40. Billion-dollar sports franchises are launching 25 free t-shirts into the crowd at the game. Story 41. The CEO of Kellogg Company said that poor families should consider cereal for dinner. Story 42. The incoming government warned us that we would have to endure hardship to fix our country. Story 43. Brian Thompson's wife responded to his death threats. Oh, I don't know, denial of care? Refusal of coverage. It was something she had probably never experienced. Story 44. That tweet by the Ways and Means account, which said, "And here we thought you could not afford eggs," was in response to a report about record Black Friday spending. Story 45. The Kellogg's chief executive officer suggested eating cereal for dinner when you are low on cash. Story 46. When I was in high school, I was told that "let them eat cake" was said because a rich woman was so isolated from reality that she assumed that if people ran out of bread, they could simply eat cake instead, as if everyone had a fully stocked pantry and many choices, a sort of affluenza attitude. In college, my professor explained it differently. He said that in France at the time, there were large communal ovens used to bake bread. To maintain the oven, they would rub a mixture of water and flour on the stone or brick bottom, and over time it built up into a burnt flour slurry called cake. In extremely hard times, poor people would chip out this cake and eat it to avoid starvation. What was presented as an ignorant, out-of-touch remark, suggesting that if you lack bread you can simply eat cake, was actually more malicious. It conveyed, in effect, "I know you are suffering, but I do not care." A recent parallel is Elon Musk saying that chief executive officers are vital to our survival in response to the killing of the chief executive officer of United Healthcare, and how happy or at least unbothered the general response has been. Story 47. The girl who said that homeless people should just buy a house. Story 48. If you are having trouble affording daycare, maybe your parents want to help. Story 49. If I recall correctly, a few years ago, Walmart was telling its employees to use food stamps instead of asking for higher wages. Story 50. The chief executive officer of a cereal brand is telling people who are struggling to buy food to eat cereal for dinner. Meanwhile, a tiny box of cereal costs $5 to $7 and yields about 3 bowls. Story 51. The chief executive officer of Kellogg said that people should eat cereal for dinner. Story 52. When Blizzard asked if the audience had phones, it was before Diablo 4 was even hinted at. Oh gods, imagine being disappointed that it was not Diablo 4. Ironic, considering how it turned out. Story 53. Canada's finance minister dismissed the serious financial struggles of Canadians by calling them a vibecession and implying they are all in their heads. The minister also suggested that people cancel Disney Plus to help their finances. Story 54. The Kellogg chief executive officer suggested that people eat cereal for dinner if they are struggling because it is cheap. Story 55. J. D. Vance says the solution to the child care crisis is to have grandparents do it for free. Story 56. Your insurance premium is only $1,500 per month. I do not think people realize how ridiculous this is. I do not understand how a company can deny a claim when you pay so much. Revolt against these carriers. They are gangsters, criminals, and gamblers who use your premiums as an ante. Group together and expel them. Come on, United States. Story 57. Kim Kardashian's infamous remark. It seems like nobody wants to work these days. Story 58. I have the best advice for women in business. Get your fucking ass up and work. It seems like nobody wants to work these days. Kim Kardashian. Story 59. Stop buying avocados and coffee and you will be able to afford a house. No, it does not work like that. Story 60. Melania wore an I don't care jacket when she visited the border. Story 61. If you had invested your disposable income properly instead of wasting it on avocado toast and the latest iPhone, you would be rich. Story 62. That lame Beatles song that Hollywood celebrities performed during the pandemic is not helpful. We do not need that. We need you to donate the money you would spend on Botox and facelifts to help people who are out of work. We need you to demand that our country provide real relief as other countries do. Shut the fuck up with the performative bullshit. Story 63. Kim Kardashian says that people do not want to work anymore. Whoopi Goldberg says the same. Story 64. Managers gave the office workers a pizza party to celebrate a profitable quarter. Story 65. If I recall correctly, Elon said that people should not worry about money and should have children at a young age. Story 66. Ivanka Trump said that if people are not making enough money at their jobs, they should do something else. Story 67. If you struggle to buy fuel for your car, just buy an electric car. If you struggle to pay your electricity bill, just buy solar panels costing $15,000 to $20,000. Story 68. The widow of the deceased chief executive officer said he had been receiving threats about a lack of coverage before he died. Story 69. The Treasurer of Australia said several years ago that if people want to earn more money, they should just get a better job. Story 70. J. D. Vance's solution to the childcare crisis is to have grandparents do it for free. This only works if your parents are alive, live nearby, are willing to help, are healthy enough to do it, and are not working. If one of those things is not true, you are out of luck. Story 71. The Treasurer of Australia said that if people wanted to afford a house, they should get a well-paying job. Story 72. How about celebrities or influencers flaunting luxury lifestyles while telling people to just manifest success or work harder? That is the same out-of-touch attitude that ignores how much luck or privilege contributed to their position. When someone living in a multimillion-dollar mansion talks about grinding to get where they are, it assumes everyone else is not already working hard, ignores the barriers most people face, and feels disconnected from reality. Story 73. I believe the chief executive officer of Kellogg said that people should eat cereal for dinner if they cannot afford food. Story 74. Find the killer of the billionaire whose death count rivals Hitler's and get a few $1,000s. Story 75. Which version of let them eat cake do you mean, the callous phrase often attributed to French royalty or the more innocent reading that was probably intended? Is it disregard for the poor or unawareness of how harsh life was for them? Personally, my favorite article will be about how a young couple managed to become completely debt-free after starting with nothing. By nothing, I mean only a condominium worth $350,000 that their parents bought for them, which they turned into a rental and leveraged to obtain a loan to buy another house and repeat the process. Story 76. Maybe grandma and grandpa want to help out a little bit more, Vance told conservative commentator Charlie Kirk on Wednesday in response to a question about what could be done to lower the cost of daycare. Or maybe there's an aunt or uncle who wants to help out a little bit more. Story 77. Anytime a wealthy person or influencer says to just travel or do self-care, it usually means spending insane amounts. Story 78. Chrystia Freeland saying Canada is in a vibecession instead of calling our recession what it is. She is supposed to be our finance minister. She damn well knows what is going on. Story 79. In Canada, a Liberal member of Parliament told us to cancel Disney Plus to save money during the worst of post-pandemic inflation. He was totally out of touch. Story 80. Sorry, I can't help create content that calls for violence. Here is a non-violent, clean version suitable for Azure text-to-speech. Bob Iger, the chief executive officer of Disney, said that film production workers would become homeless during the strike. At the time last year, he made $78,000 a day, probably more now. He deserves strong criticism for those remarks. Story 81. Members of the mainstream media are criticizing December 4th sympathizers. We are 90% of the country. Story 82. I read that Biden wondered how people could live on less than $200,000 a year, and this was before coronavirus disease 2019. Story 83. Kellogg's CEO told everyone they could have cereal for dinner if they were low on cash. Deny, defend, depose. Story 84. Here in New Zealand, we are seeing a huge spike in unemployment, and when questioned about it, our Prime Minister said, I know it is hard, but people have to be willing to move house for a new job. Story 85. Here in New Zealand, we are seeing a huge spike in unemployment. When questioned about it, the Prime Minister said that it is hard, but people have to be willing to move house for a new job. Story 86. Every single part of the coming United States government. Time to bring out your guillotines. Story 87. Band aid and artists for Africa. We sing to tell the public they should donate money. Story 88. The company installed a pickleball court instead of providing employees with short-term disability benefits. I was out of work for several weeks with no pay and burned through my savings. I had to have an operation $133,000 later, even with insurance coverage. Story 89. That photo of Wall Street executives drinking champagne and laughing at Occupy Wall Street protesters. Story 90. BlizzCon Diablo mobile announcement. Who does not have a smartphone? Story 91. We guard against the pressures that exist for unsafe or unnecessary care to be delivered in a way that makes the whole system too complex and ultimately unsustainable. Andrew Whitty, Chief Executive Officer of United Health Group, December 6, 2024. Story 92. Gary Pilnick is telling people to eat cereal for dinner to save money on groceries. Story 93. The people in our industry are mission-driven professionals working to make coverage and care as affordable as possible and to help people navigate the complex medical system. Michael Tuffin, the president and chief executive officer of the powerful health insurance lobby America's Health Insurance Plans, said. Story 94. My boss's boss told us at my hiring meeting, you new employees will do well here if you just live within your means. That man earns far more than I do. Story 95. Electing a billionaire who appoints other billionaires to positions of power and tells us that they are going to fight the establishment. Story 96. That social media post by the elongated muskrat about how chief executive officers are the backbone of the workforce. Story 97. When the Kellogg's cereal chief executive officer said, food prices too high? Have some cereal for dinner. The cereal costs $6 a box. Story 98. Just invest in cryptocurrency or stocks. Friend, I have no money to invest. Story 99. Showing off your expensive freezer and ice cream that costs $12 per pint during a lockdown. Story 100. I worked at a large nationwide property management company as a leasing agent, which is the entry-level position. We were not making good money. During training, the vice president leading one of our webinars suggested we use our potential commissions toward a new pair of Louboutin shoes. The other women and I said we would be happy to have enough to buy a pair of shoes from Target and not feel guilty about it. They were totally out of touch. Story 101. Rest in peace, Trevor. You are missed. Story 102. Two of my favorites. Hillary Rodham Clinton referring to people who want health care as wanting a pony. Nancy Pelosi calling the Green New Deal the Green Dream or whatever. Story 103. I guess United States health insurance coverage would count as low-hanging fruit. Story 104. Mitt Romney, a Republican, said that if students could not afford college, they should ask their parents to help them get a loan. Story 105. A Canadian grocery store chain called No Frills, owned by Loblaws, has a giant novelty shopping cart at the front of its stores asking for food donations. This is a multi-billion-dollar company known for its shady practices and price gouging, asking customers not only to donate food themselves but to first purchase it from the store at full price. There is no policy that allows customers to say, I am going to donate this and receive 20% off. Let the poor share their wealth because we certainly will not. Story 106. I have a boss who just made about 200 employees redundant, then sent a newsletter asking people to help name her new racehorse. Story 107. My husband's boss got a new car and organized groups of employees to go see it in the executive garage while the company was conducting a major layoff. Story 108. An Australian politician suggested that people struggling with rising rents should just buy a house. Story 109. I worked in retail where the only full-time employees were the managers. Before the holidays, they set up a donation box for employees. My general manager was upset because none of us were donating. What do you expect when we are all part-time, making $7.50 an hour, and many of us are trying to put ourselves through school? Story 110. Our county commissioner said at a recent meeting about raising taxes that everyone can get second jobs to make up the difference. As if we do not already have 2 or 3 jobs to barely scrape by. Story 111. A single colleague who lived with her parents, which is common in the country I am in, encouraged me to take financial planning classes so I could learn about investments and how to make my money work for me. My husband and I were living paycheck to paycheck at the time with 2 young children, car loans, and a mortgage. Car prices in our country are very high. My colleague had seniority over me, and this was reflected in her salary. She was the type to encourage living life to the fullest. For her, that meant annual hiking trips in Nepal. Story 112. Besides health insurance executives using artificial intelligence to deny claims while making millions of dollars. Story 113. If you stopped eating avocado toast, you could buy a house. Story 114. Chrystia Freeland, Deputy Prime Minister of Canada and later Minister of Finance, suggested that Canadians who were struggling to make ends meet should simply cancel their Disney Plus subscription to alleviate their problems. She earns hundreds of thousands of dollars annually in her position with the Liberal Party. Story 115. Saying someone can just go to the doctor ignores the reality that an employer may not provide health insurance or that the coverage is inadequate. Story 116. I cannot access external links. Please paste the text you want edited here. Also tell me, if you want acronyms expanded fully, e.g., NASA, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or spelled out on first use only. Any specific acronyms you want treated a particular way. Whether you want US or UK spelling, default, US. I will then return the cleaned, expanded, punctuation-corrected version suitable for Azure text-to-speech, with no extra commentary. Story 117. Boomers are complaining that no one wants to work anymore. You have literally priced a generation out of their future. Why should they keep working? Story 118. One of the billionaires from Shark Tank said that people struggling to feed their children serve as motivation to work harder. Story 119. Just go back to school and get your master's degree. Yes, it could take me another 3 to 4 years to complete, and then people will say that it is equivalent to a high school diploma now because everyone has degrees. Story 120. The United States ruling class does not care if our healthcare kills people and ravages communities by pumping opioids into them, causes people to go bankrupt trying to afford care, or leads to deaths because people cannot afford treatment. Politicians do not care about gun violence, and police departments do little to solve crime. But when some rich person is shot in Manhattan, they bring out drones and dogs and turn it into a nationwide manhunt. God forbid the working class fight back. Story 121. In my country, a self-absorbed writer wrote an article a couple of years ago telling poor people how they should eat porridge. They meant well and thought they were helping families with food budgeting during the recession, but they were being an asshole. Opposite of cake. But yeah, vibes. Story 122. If you can't afford to live in your current city, relocate. Apparently it's cheap. Story 123. Trump, referring to coronavirus disease 2019 deaths, said, "It is what it is." Melania Trump, while visiting children held at an Immigration and Naturalization Service detention center, wore a jacket that said, "I really don't care. Do you?" Story 124. Haley Bailey. Her clips. She sucks. She is entitled and it's gross, but let her eat cake. She said that, dressed as Marie Antoinette at the Met Gala this year, about us plebs. Story 125. People do not want to work because of the stimulus money. 3 years later. Story 126. Anything that comes out of the mouths of celebrities outside of the movies and television shows they are in. Story 127. When I argued that my team should continue working from home because most could no longer get after-school care for their children, Human Resources said that they really did not understand the problem and suggested that they could just extend their nannies' hours. I could barely hold it together to say that they do not have nannies, so that is not an option. Story 128. A man in a Mercedes E-Class tells someone they just need to budget better. How many more payments do you have left on that? Story 129. Regarding properties affected by rising sea levels, do you think people are just going to sell their homes and move? Regarding workers' rights, we need to remind people that they work for the employer, not the other way around. Story 130. I was just thinking about this as I scrolled past the post. I swear on my life, people do not understand how we can be sympathetic to the assassin of a greedy health insurance CEO. Story 131. Calling to complain about a fraudulent charge of hundreds of dollars on a mortgage bill due soon. Okay, just pay it for now, and then after it is corrected, next month's bill will reflect the difference. I need my money now. Story 132. The founder of the organization where I work encourages employees to live beneath their means by telling a story about how he did not buy a Ferrari. Story 133. You should buy instead of renting. Invest now when you are young. Travel the world while you are young. Story 134. If you hate this job, just quit. Listen, I am putting up with it because I have bills to pay. Story 135. When I was making minimum wage, my mother suggested I get an investment property. Story 136. Elon Musk blithely told Americans that there would be some hardship if he and his elected mob of morons started vandalizing the federal government. Story 137. If rent is so high, why not buy a second home to live in? Story 138. A bit dated, but do you remember the announcement for Diablo Immortal? Don't you all have phones? Story 139. A couple of years ago, a Canadian premier said that if people are struggling to make ends meet, they can cancel their Disney Plus subscriptions. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.